Okay, we're now recording. Okay, so this is our final class. We will do our final review today. I had put 3 practice tests on the internet, so we'll go through those today, discuss them. The final test should pretty much be the same time as this class next week, but instead of meeting, I'll just make it available noon to midnight. So it'll be available for 12 hours on the 28th, right? The law class, let me just make sure this is scheduled right. So
I think it's 29th.
You're right, it's the 29th. I'm confused because of the time difference. So the final will be available on the 29th from 12 to 12. The law is on the 28th. If anybody who is watching this has, or you guys have any problem with that date, just WeChat me and we'll find out a way, or say it now, but, or WeChat me and we'll just find out a way for me to open it up earlier for you. There's a lot of tools that I can use on Blackboard so people can take it at different times, or I could give you a special one-time code to take it and stuff like that. But for now, that'll be the time. As I said before, I strongly recommend that so the way you do it is you go to Blackboard. In the content section, there will be a tab that will say Real Final Exam. Click that tab and you're taken to a screen that tells you some instructions and then has a start button. Whenever you press the start button, you will have 3 hours. You probably don't need 3 hours. But I will say you probably need at least 2 hours. If you're done in an hour or an hour and a half, I'd say go back. I'd say you probably missed something. Take your time. I know it's stressful to take an exam, but this is an open book exam. If you need to take time to get a drink of water and get some notes and, don't turn it in after an hour. But you probably don't need 3 hours, but that's how long I'll give you. I strongly recommend that when you are about to take the exam, you open up some sort of Word program like Microsoft Word or Pages and write your answer in that and immediately save it. Don't wait until the end. So open up a Microsoft Word document on your computer, save it immediately, and then type your answers in the document. When you're pretty much done or you have 15 minutes left or something, then copy and paste that onto Blackboard. I recommend you do not write directly on Blackboard. The reason is if you write your answer, it's not saved. And sometimes students have had, electricity problem or internet problem, and all of a sudden their answer is gone. And the same way with Microsoft Word, I've seen students write on that, but they didn't save the document. And then they write for 2 hours, they click the wrong button and the document is gone. So I've seen those things happen. So open up a Microsoft Word document, save it immediately, and type your answer in that, and then copy and paste that to Blackboard. Any questions on the final exam before we start reviewing? No? Okay. So let's get into our review then. There were 3 tests that, as I said, I posted. So let's look at the first one. Okay, so I don't know if you guys read these, but we'll go through them. I think we'll have time to do all 3 probably. Maybe we'll just do the first 2. But the first one is this Carter Cleaning Company. I put them together and let's make sure we understand what kind of things you need to answer these. So Carter Cleaning Company. Jennifer Carter graduated from State University in June 2016, and after considering several job offers, decided to do what she really always planned to do, go into business with her father, Jack Carter. Jack had opened his first laundromat in 2005 and his second in 2009. The main attraction of these coin laundry businesses for him is that they were capital intensive rather than labor intensive. Thus, once the investment machinery was made, the stores could be run with just one unskilled attendant and have none of the labor problems one normally expects from being in the retail service business. Is there anything in this paragraph to discuss? Probably not. I think this idea of being capital intensive is maybe a relevant idea that might come back. Originally, he was looking for one unskilled attendant, and then maybe to understand something about the dates. This was opened in 2005 and his second one in 2009. Okay, Jack had decided by 2009 to expand the services in each of his stores to include the dry cleaning and pressing of clothes. He embarked on a strategy of related diversification by adding new services that were related to and consistent with his existing coin laundry activities. He added these in part because he wanted to better utilize the unused space in the large stores he currently had under lease. But he also did so because he was tired of sending out the dry cleaning and pressing work to a dry cleaner 5 miles away, who then took most of what should have been Jack's profits. He was sufficiently satisfied with the performance of the stores to open 4 more of the same type of store over the next 5 years. Each store had its own on-site manager and on average employs about 7 employees. It was this 6-store chain that Jennifer joined upon graduating from State University. Jennifer's position is to serve as a consultant to her father and to bring modern management concepts and techniques to facilitate its growth. Okay, so some ideas here. Related diversification. We talked about this when we talked about strategic HRM. I don't really think you need to talk about this, but it is something we learned. I don't know, does anybody remember what this means, diversification?
Isn't it when like you partner up with another business that's either related to your industry or unrelated?
Sure. That is pretty much what it means. So there's 2 ways to grow a business, right? That's kind of the topic of diversification. It falls in the idea of how to grow your business. And generally, when you're talking about growing a business, either you're talking about selling new things to your existing customers, or you're talking about selling the same things to new customers. Pretty much that's growth. Either you're expanding your customer base or you're expanding your product base. There's kind of 2 ways to do this with it, which are diversification and integration. And there's forward and backward integration and related and unrelated diversification. With integration, and this was kind of the chart that looked like a SWOT diagram sort of, or an XY axis. So with integration, you're cutting out things that you used to pay people to do. So, I mean, this is exactly, Jack is also integrating because he used to send out the dry cleaning, right? This is what he used to pay someone else to do. He used to pay someone else to do the dry cleaning. He would send it out to a dry cleaner 5 miles away, and they took most of the profits. But when he had enough money, he decided to expand the services in each of his stores to include dry cleaning. That's an example of integration, right? He's integrating dry cleaning into his store. And there's more integration he could do. Let's say that he became the biggest dry cleaner in America. Maybe he would open a factory that actually makes the machines, rather than buying the machines from General Electric or something else. That would be backwards integration, where he's integrating not integrating the suppliers. He's integrating the suppliers instead of the distributors. But anything integration is when you cut out someone else and bring it in-house and do it yourself. So he's trying to bring this dry cleaning in-house. Diversification is when you add or sell new services, you partner with somebody else. So they call this diversification. I actually think this is more of integration. I think diversification is when you're selling another product or service, but he's selling this idea of dry cleaning. So, okay. The other thing that's important is now instead of one unskilled attendant, now each store pretty much has 8 people, which is a huge difference. Now there's a manager and 7 employees. Okay, and here I think in this paragraph is where we get into the HR. One problem that has concerned Jennifer was issues of equal employment. The hiring was handled by each store manager. They often asked female applicants who will take care of your children while you're in the store. Minority applicants were asked about their arrest records and credit histories. While she was considering these problems, Jennifer received an email from one of the female workers complaining that her manager was making unwelcome sexual advances and threatening to fire her if she didn't go out with him. Another worker, a 60-year-old man with 30 years of experience in the industry, complained that he was being paid less than people half his age who were doing the same job. So now we have some issues. So before I discuss these issues, I might here start by giving a background what is HRM? You know, maybe what is the organizational iceberg? Anything else you think we should discuss in the beginning? Anybody else have any background you would tell me besides what is HRM?
The laws about employment, like sexual harassment.
Well, I think that's next.
Okay.
You know, I think this is background is, so with the what is HRM, I would talk about the 5 elements of staffing, the 3 additional elements. I guess that's about it. I don't really need much more than that for what is HRM. Yeah, okay. Now, after this paragraph, this is where we get into the laws. So now let's start talking about this idea of outlining. I'm a very strong believer in outlining, which means that before you write an answer, you should know what you're going to say. You should, in my opinion, you should never be writing an answer to an essay question unless you already know what you're about to write. You should never be wondering, what should I write next? So outlines are very important and actually require some time. It takes a few minutes at the beginning to write an outline. It's very, very important in my opinion. So if we were going to write an outline of this first paragraph, what would we be talking about here? So we know that the topic is, right, laws. Now, what are we going to discuss in this topic first? Someone tell me something we'll discuss.
Harassment.
Okay. Now, one of the good things, of course, is on the computer, you can write down all of these problems and then move them around with copy and paste stuff. But harassment is something here. Anything else?
I don't know. See the
I don't know
laws.
if yeah, is that pre-employment question or something else?
Yeah, pre-employment questions.
Employment. Also, maybe disparate treatment or.
The age, what was the
Okay, there was a problem with age.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like what we're doing right now is first, we are describing the problems. And that's fine. You know, we can do it that way. I think that's a totally legitimate way to answer these questions, is to identify the problems first. So what's a problem here? One problem is these pre-employment questions. They ask females who will take care of your children. They ask minorities about their arrest records and credit histories. That's one problem. That's the first problem here, which is pre-employment questions. Then while she's considering this, Jennifer gets an email from one of the female workers complaining about sexual advances. Okay, harassment, that's our second one. Second problem. The third problem is this worker who's 60 years old, and that's age discrimination. So I think this is a totally reasonable way to sort of organize this. Now, other people could organize it differently. Other people might organize it by chronological laws. And they might say the first law was the Discrimination Act of, 1890, whatever. And the second law is the Equal Pay Law of 1963. And the next one is Title VII of 1964 with the EEOC. And then the Age Discrimination Act of 1967. That's fine. That's a totally fine way to organize it too. But you need to have some kind of way that you're going to organize this. I think problems are fine. So if you're going to organize it by problems, then pre-employment questions, and you would discuss that. Sexual harassment, what would we write about that? Probably we would write quid pro quo and hostile environment. Age discrimination, what would we write about that? I don't know that we need anything about that. Then I might add additional laws. The additional laws, then I would talk about, let's see, discrimination in general. And for discrimination in general, I'd probably talk about, what was the first one? What year was that? Anybody remember? 1890 something.
1884, maybe.
18, maybe.
I have it
Now
here.
you're gonna make me look. All right.
Is it 1866?
Yes, good one. 1866.
1866. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. So where can I put this? Okay, so the 1866 Act, and that told us about the Civil Rights Act 1866, and that gave us like disparate treatment, disparate effect. It also gave us the FOQ. Then we had the FLSA, I think was next. Then we had equal pay. Title VII plus the EEOC. We already talked about age. OSHA. Vocational rehabilitation, pregnancy, ADA. Civil Rights Act, 1991. With ADA, I might add reasonable accommodations and undue hardship, is that what that's called? Yeah. And then I might describe defenses to discrimination. We have the FOQ we discussed before, business necessity. Anything else? Well, I guess I'd put here negligent hiring torts. Now, I don't expect you to write down all of this stuff, but I will tell you that when you show me your work, when you give your answer, you can put your outline into the answer. You can have an outline first. And that would show me that you know that all of this stuff is part of a possible answer. And I'll give you extra points for knowing that. So, you know, I don't expect you to discuss everything. One of the most important things in essay tests is time management. So I always, when I start this, I read the whole exam twice. The first time I read it is just to get it in my head. The second time I read it is to highlight it and maybe write some notes. So I'll always read it twice, and then I'll figure out how many sections does this have that I need to answer, and how much time do I have? So how much time do we have to write the background? Let's say you give yourself 15 minutes. Well, then I usually give myself a note. You know, I plan this out. Then if we have, let's say, whatever, 6 topics, and you have 2.5 hours or 3 hours, I would say you have, what, 6 topics, 3 hours. 3 hours is 180 minutes divided by 6 is, what's 180 divided by 6? 30? No. 30? 30 minutes
60.
per part. That's why I didn't go into the
30.
sciences. So let's say you give yourself 25 minutes per part so that you have time. And that's it. When you get to 25 minutes, you know, so you have to pay attention to the time, not the time of the whole exam, the time of the parts. And a lot of people, they just don't recognize that. Hello, Ethan and Bella. So that's something I would be aware of, is don't give yourself just time for the test. Give yourself a time deadline for each part. And when you finish that amount of time, you go on to the next one. And I'll tell you, the reason is, as a teacher, it doesn't matter to me. So if I give you like this, something like this probably has 7 parts, 6 or 7 parts. Each part to me has an equal amount of points available. So if there's, you know, 5 parts, it's 20 points each. If there's 7 parts, it's whatever, 18, 16 points each. There's not more points for part 1 than part 2. It's the same. So if you spend so much time on part 1 on the laws, and you get a perfect score on this part, but then you didn't do the last part, you will have lost all the points in the last part, but you'll have gotten an extra 2 points here. So you will have lost like 16 points because you didn't do the last part, but gain 2 points. That's not worth it at all. You know, so it's definitely worth it to do a so-so job on every part instead of doing a wonderful job on the early parts and a bad job on the last parts, which is what most students do. Let's go on to the next part. The Carter Cleaning Company has a very simple quality management system. When there is a problem in any of the stores, Jack goes in and holds an employee meeting. He pays the workers for an extra hour, meets them all after the store closes in the evening. These meetings have been useful to Jack to identify and fix several problems. Jennifer has considered whether these employee meetings should be expanded to give the employees a bigger role in managing the Carter store's quality. Her father is unsure about this idea. He feels that because the workers make so little money, they will not be interested in acting like mini managers. So, what is the topic here? What are we talking about? I mean, we're talking about something related to quality and quality management. What is that in HR?
Performance management.
Could be. I mean, performance management has to do usually with appraisals. And there's something a little more related to that over here. This evaluation part is more about evaluations and appraisals. This is, to me, it's more strategic HRM, right? Strategic HRM is about quality. That's the idea of strategic HRM. So, you know, the first part, we did it based on what are the problems. Here, I don't really see any very clear problem. You know, maybe if there is a problem, it would be like the employees don't really care about quality. Something like that. But I don't really know that there's a problem. So for strategic HRM, what will we talk about? Well, the first and biggest point is the hierarchy of goals. So what's the hierarchy of goals? Can anybody tell me that?
From the top to the bottom, like everyone has to be on the same page of the goals.
Sure. Sure, that's fine. Saying it that way is correct. I'm not asking for any sort of specialized language. Yeah, everybody has to be on the same page from the top to the bottom about the goals of the company. So that if the goal of the company is to have good quality, right now the managers, Jack and Jennifer, they think that's the goal, but the employees don't necessarily think that's the goal. So in terms of this, we would have the 7-step strategic management process, and maybe where does HRM fit into this 7-step process. And we talked about the steps where HRM fits in, which is like the SWOT diagram or the SWOT analysis. HRM fits in. What does HRM do for the internal part? Can anybody tell me, what does HRM do for the strength weakness part?
Staffing, hiring, training.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, because HRM does the staffing and hiring and training, HRM knows what are the strengths and weaknesses of the company. They know the strengths and weaknesses of the people.
Like identify the resources within the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Jack and Jennifer want to have high quality, they want to fix problems, they want people to be mini managers, right now they don't have any way of knowing which employees are suitable for this. Not everybody's suitable for everything, but if you have some sort of HRM feature in your company, then you have a good idea of what your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of your people. You know, Jack's idea is, I don't think they'll want to do that. They don't make a lot of money. But that's a very non-HRM way to look at it. Of course, not everybody wants to do that, but some people might. You know, sorry?
Carla? 85, 33, 95.
You talking to us?
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay. So some people in the organization certainly might be interested in getting additional training, becoming a manager in the future, all of these things. Then for external, which is the opportunities and threats, how is HRM related to that? Anybody?
They look at
From
trend
the customer.
environment.
It knows about competition
Sure.
and like laws and stuff.
About the Sure. So HRM knows about things that are internal, which is pretty much the employees, and HRM knows about things that are external, like the competition and the business environment. And those are valuable things. When Jack is considering making any sort of changes, right now he's not really fitting HRM into any of this. With SWOT analysis, another one is going from the mission statement to, like, I guess you'd say actionable goals. You know, going from the mission statement, which is very broad, to strategic goals, to action plans. That's something that HR works with also because of the hierarchy of goals. After this, I would say HR also fits in with evaluation of whether the goals were met. And probably I would say HRM also fits into things like using digital tools to measure quality. And of the digital tools that we've talked about in this class, there are things like the digital dashboard, and, well, thank you. And that was the presentation we saw at the end of class, the last presentation. Okay, and I would think that would be a pretty clear outline of what I'd be looking for here. Again, I might give myself 25 minutes. It has always been hard for Jack to find excellent employees. There are many applicants that apply for the job at Carter Cleaning Company, but the pay is not better than other cleaning companies, and most workers end up changing jobs frequently. The work is not very interesting. It can be hot and uncomfortable in the cleaning store, and there are not many benefits. Many of his competitors have up to 400% turnover of staff each year. Generally, Jack will hire anyone who he thinks can do the job, but Jennifer feels there must be a better way to recruit applicants and reduce turnover. Hard situation. What topic are we talking about? Anybody?
performance management.
Sorry?
Compensation.
Staffing and hiring.
Staffing and hiring. Okay. I mean, remember from the beginning,
Recruitment.
we talked about the 5 elements of staffing and the 3 additional elements. You know, so to me, this would probably be recruiting, selection, compensation, evaluation, or training, or health and fairness, health and safety, fairness, and unions. I mean, that's really the choices we have, I think, when I say what topic is it. Sorry? So to me, I would say this is recruitment. Finding the employees. Right? This is not choosing them, this is finding them. Now, you could also say that this is choosing, right? This is finding employees who are honest. You know, maybe we put these 2 paragraphs together and call it recruitment and selection. That's fine, but let's call it recruitment first. So in recruitment, what are we talking about?
Selection.
Well, selection is a whole other topic.
Maybe internal and external.
Internal and external what?
Hiring,
Interview.
recruitment.
Oh, internal versus external hiring. Okay, sure. So like internal and external recruitment. Now I would say actually that is part of what I called the 9-step recruitment sort of plan. Does anybody remember the steps of this? What was the first step?
Job analysis, job specification.
Okay. Job analysis. I mean, that's definitely going to be part of this. So job description, job specification. The idea here is you can't hire people or find people unless you're very clear on what the job is. So that's the first part, is job description, job specification, and a little explanation of what that is. With these 2, job description, I would say that's the first part. After that is succession planning. What's succession planning? Ethan, you want to tell me what's succession planning?
That is finding, isn't it, replacements for managers, the next
Good.
in line to be a manager?
Good. Then what's forecasting?
That's seeing what will become available, what is going to be happening in the future. Where do we need to prepare for new employees or new managers?
Sure, and also how many people will we need? You know, before doing internal and external recruitment, you know, part of this idea, the problem is, you know, if we wanted to talk about problems, because I think that's also a good way to look at things. What are the problems? Jack can't keep employees, high turnover. They're choosing anyone who can do the job, and those people quit quickly. I mean, that's the problem. So how do we fix this? Well, let's, you know, kind of take a step back and understand the job, make sure we're planning first for the managers, forecasting how many people we'll need, workforce planning, looking at the environment and seeing how many people are available, then doing internal recruitment, and I'd say plus job boards, external recruitment plus advertisements, diversity, recruitment, creation of application forms, and then interviews. Those were really the steps in the recruitment plan. In addition to finding a way to reduce the employee turnover, Jack is also concerned about finding employees who are honest. Employee theft can be quite common at small businesses like a cleaning company. Sometimes employees will secretly wash clothes without writing up a receipt for the customer and just keep the money for themselves. Jack doesn't know how to screen employees for something like this, but feels it's a very important issue. So this is some sort of testing.
Like,
And again, if we want to, you know, point out the problem, we can. The problem is he doesn't know how to choose people who are honest. But okay, what would we say about testing? Anybody give me some information on testing?
pre-employment test,
Sorry?
employment test.
Sure, that there's pre-employment tests and there's kind of post-employment tests. And I think what Jack wants is really the pre-employment, right? He's trying to find the right people. So let's talk a little about pre-employment tests. What do we need to know about a pre-employment test?
Types of pre-employment tests.
Sure, that's one thing to know. Can you tell me some types?
Personality, psychological, physical, alcohol and drugs, integrity,
Sure.
and skills.
Great. And with psychological, I think that also goes cognitive. With personality, I think we probably also have the projective tests, but that's good. That's our types of tests. Anything else we need to know about pre-employment tests?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Out these kind of things like these tests, do we have to explain what these tests are, or can we just list them?
You should, well, so, you know, what I want you to be able to do is answer the question. So if you just list all of these tests, I'll give you, you know, 1 or 2 points, but that's kind of easy because that's just copying and pasting. I mean, just from today, from this final review, you could write down those types of tests and then on the final exam, just list them. It doesn't tell me that you understand which one should be used in this situation. You know, for you to write a definition of every one, that's also not a very good use of your time because you could just copy and paste that. Again, it doesn't show me that you understand. So, you know, for personality, if you want to write a few words like this test is about how people think and feel and believe, and psychological cognitive, this is about IQ and EQ and how the mind works. And this is about the body, but not only strength. And this is, you know, like, that's fine. I don't think you have to really, you know, but to answer the question, like, let's go back and look at some more clear answers in a second. Right now, we're just sort of doing an outline of the answers. But for this question, for Jack's problem, what kind of tests should he use? Let's finish writing this outline and then answer that. So we need validity and reliability. What's the difference? What's validity? What's reliability? Can somebody tell me what is, yeah?
Validity is like accuracy of the measurement, like accuracy of the measure what you're supposed to measure.
Okay.
Reliability is consistency.
Good. And then post-employment tests, I'd say that's it. And then interviewing. So probably that's what we have for testing and selection. Now, we've done this sort of outline. The last part that we'll add to each outline would be in our case. Now, in our case, what should we do, or what should Jack do here? If you are Jennifer and you now have told Jack there's all these different kinds of tests and it needs to be valid and reliable, blah, blah, blah. Now, what would you recommend to Jack? Harry, can you give me some recommendation based on this problem? I mean, this is the problem. Jack doesn't know how to screen employees for something like theft or honesty, or he has no idea how to do that. What would you recommend for him?
I guess to like implement some of these tests.
Yeah, obviously, but can you be more clear? Like, what tests? When, how, where?
So probably personality, if it's to do with theft or integrity and honesty.
Okay. Anais, are you there?
I'm here.
Would you agree that we should use a personality test?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because they allow you to test for larger things. Like, it's less specific, I think. So you can kind of see more of the person and how they're going to be on the job.
Okay. Can anybody tell me a possible problem of using a personality test?
Can people lie on a personality test and say that that's not their personality?
That's going to be hard. I mean, you can't really lie on the MBTI. So, but that's a good thought. You know, think about this job. This job is washing and drying clothes. Are people going to be comfortable taking personality tests? Like taking a 45-minute personality test to wash and dry clothes? I don't know. I just think it might be an issue. So I think I agree with the integrity, honesty testing, and you're saying plus personality testing before Now, Jody, would you do these tests before or after an interview?
Sure, before the interview. So we have like to ask the person what is your idea or goal to our company, something like that, with your personality.
Okay.
Right.
So why do you think you should do it before the interview, not after?
To know the person first.
Okay. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. That's okay. Christine, would you use any sort of physical test?
Physical, not really.
Okay. Would you use an alcohol or drug test?
Alcohol, not really. Honesty? No, I don't think. They're doing theft. It's like about theft, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem. Yeah, I don't think I would.
Would you use an IQ test
No.
or an EQ test? No? Okay. Would you use a projective test?
No.
So I would say like physical is required here because it's not just someone like sitting in the office, because you have to work with your hand and then you have to move somewhere always, right?
Okay, so maybe, just to make sure they can use these heavy machines or they can lift a basket of clothes or, something like that. That's not a bad idea. But okay, integrity, honesty, and personality testing before interview. Maybe I think a possible problem would be asking people to take a long test for a relatively low paying job, something like that. Now that would answer the question to me, what should Jack do? But also I would say this test must be valid and reliable, and you have to explain what that means. Like you can't just say, Jack, go get a valid, reliable test. Jack doesn't know how to do that. Jack doesn't know what you're talking about. I mean, if I said to you, okay, Harry, you're working at my company, you're my new employee, and we're going to do some job interviews. So just go out today and get a reliable, valid test. Like you wouldn't necessarily know how to do that. You would need to figure out, how do you get a test that's valid? How do you get a test that's reliable? And we learned that, the idea that these tests are available, they can be purchased. But that if you want to validate it yourself, you can do that too. But how do you validate it yourself? How would you validate a test yourself? Anybody remember? There was a 5-step method.
Analyze the job.
Well, certainly you need to do that. I mean, there's no question you need a job analysis first, but with self-validation, the idea is validity tells us, does this test measure what it's supposed to measure? So to make sure that's true, what you would have to do is create a test and then give it to people, give it to your employees, and then after 6 months, then check, did the people who got a high score on the test actually do a good job? Did the people who got a low score on the test actually do a bad job? And then give the test to more people and then wait 6 months or 3 months or something. So the problem with self-validation is it takes a long time. You have to give the test to people, then wait and see how they really did at work. Now, you could buy a test, but it could be expensive or require a special interpreter for the results. You know, not all tests can just be given by you or I. Some tests, like the Rorschach test, that test of pictures and ink blots, that has to be, somebody has to be trained to give that test. You know, so while I do want you to give me, you know, a background to testing and different kinds of tests, it's also very important to me that you're answering the question. Looking back on like recruitment, we discussed all these different types of recruitment. Now, if their problem is that many applicants apply, but the pay is not good, workers quit frequently, the work is not interesting, it's hot and uncomfortable, there's up to 400% turnover, these are the problems. Now, Jack will hire anybody he thinks can do the job. So what would we do here in our case? Any suggestions? Christine, what's your advice? Looking at all this recruitment stuff, what should Jack do in this situation?
Yeah, make a real, like a proper job analysis. So yeah, job description, what they actually need for the employee, like what's their duties and
How?
They do what do they do? I don't know. They do what do you call, they research that. I don't know what it is.
By using research stuff. Interviews, surveys,
Right.
questionnaires, discussions, observation. You know, that is like, this is part of the answer because Jack truly doesn't know. He's a guy who spent money, rented a place, bought washing machines, and now it's going pretty well. But he truly doesn't know, you know, what this research is or what a job analysis is. So, okay, you do a proper job analysis and job description using this research. Then, you know, something like forecast how many people he will need in each store in the coming year. Analyze the local workforce to see what labor is available. Use internal recruitment. Now, a lot of students make a mistake. They'll write something like, use internal and external recruitment. Yeah, I agree, but you're not really, if you said that to Jack, Jack would say, I don't know what you mean. Just the same way, if you said to Jack, do a job analysis, Jack would say, I don't know what you mean. So you can't just throw vocabulary in and say, do a job analysis or do recruitment, because that's not, you're talking to Jack. You need to explain to him in a very common sense way what you mean. So, you know, use internal recruitment. Can someone tell me how? So that's stuff you need to prepare in your notes, right? That's stuff you need to think about. Right now, I'm just giving you a list of topics, really. But, you know, just writing down these topics, that'll get you like a D or a C in the class, just writing down the topics. Oh, Anais, welcome. You finally finished doing whatever it takes an hour and 11 minutes to do in the morning. That's lovely, but you understand this is a class. Nobody cares about that.
It's at night for me. It's because my it doesn't matter. You're right. Nobody cares.
So, you know, I still expect you, like, don't think that because this is our final review and I said internal recruitment plus job board, that this means you can just copy and paste this on the final exam and I'll give you an A. That's not what it means. You still have to go to your notes and figure out, what does this mean? How would you recommend? I mean, if you said to Jack, use internal recruitment, and then Jack says, I don't know what you mean. How do you explain that to him? You know, so what I might say is like internal recruitment means hiring people who already work for you and using the people who work for you now as a tool to find new people. So for one, with internal recruitment, you can take the people that you have now and see who is suitable for promotions, for more opportunities. You know, why are people leaving this job so quickly? Why is there 400% turnover? I would say part of it is because some people think the job is boring, but also some of it is some people are suitable for a promotion or more training, and they're not being recognized. If you guys or me took this kind of job, we know that we can, you know, someday we could run this business. But Jack doesn't know who we are, doesn't care who we are, doesn't recognize us. Yeah, we'd all quit probably and go find the next place that might recognize our talent. So internal recruitment has to do also with recognizing who in there is talented. Now, another part of it is using internal job boards and finding out for your employees now, could they recommend new people? You know, look, if you love CIP, you'll recommend that people go to CIP. And if employees like working at Jack's business, then they'll recommend to their friends that they work at Jack's business. If they hate it, they won't recommend it. So internal recruitment works with making it a good place to work. But a big part of that is recognizing who in your company is a good candidate. So to me, internal recruitment has to do with something like knowing your own staff, internal promotions, internal training, intrinsic motivation, letting current employees know about open positions, maybe giving employees an incentive to help you or to help Jack find new employees. You know, you could give the employees a commission. Say, if you find a new employee for us, you get, you know, $500 bonus or something. You know, Jack's not doing anything, and that's just internal recruitment. You know, then use external recruitment. Now, what are some external ideas? Again, you can't just say, use external recruitment. You know, I'll give you a D for that. You won't fail, but you won't get a good grade. You have to go through your notes or the book and tell me, like, what are some kinds of external recruitment? Can anybody tell me what are some kinds of external recruitment?
LinkedIn, or the Glassdoor.
Okay, but you're looking for people to work at a place washing and drying clothes. I'm not sure that LinkedIn and Glassdoor are your best choices. I mean, sure, but
Advertisements outside. Yeah, like those paper advertisements
where would you put
Asking
those?
around.
on the street.
Okay, so asking around, sort of word of mouth. I might actually call word of mouth internal recruitment, but, you know, putting up ads at local stores, you know, maybe. But you guys, I mean, you're missing a lot of stuff that we did talk about in terms of ways to use external recruitment?
Social media.
I think that's a good idea.
Employment agencies.
Yeah. You know, I definitely, a lot of like internet, job boards. I might even have a virtual, like maybe like a virtual social media get together or something. A virtual job, I wouldn't say job fair, but there are virtual job fairs. You know, because right now, the problem with something like word of mouth or putting up ads at local stores, you're really targeting only the people who live right around here. But, you know, these days, lots of people might be willing to travel 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or people might even be willing to move for a good job. So you kind of want to broaden, you know, cast a wide net. But there's a lot of stuff we could do with internal and external recruitment. And I think for a job like this, I would say probably tell Jack to focus on diversity recruitment. Can you tell me some forms of diversity recruitment?
Over 40, minorities, racial minorities.
Older employees, minority employees.
International people,
Sorry?
foreigners.
Sure. Foreigners. Sure. I mean, single mothers.
Could you do like cons?
I was
I don't
just
mean
going
to
to
say
say,
cons,
yeah,
but
ex-convicts. Hey, dog. Hey, Ethan's dog.
hi.
Any other diversity things? I mean, maybe also disabilities.
I was just going to say disabilities.
I mean, you know, for a job like this, if Jack can really get the word out there, and possible also teenage. Now, I'm not
like
saying
school co-ops, like a training or like high
sure,
school
sure.
co-op.
So for co-op, what I think of is sort of like, I'm not really sure what you would call it. In America, we have something called a halfway house, but it's somebody who comes out of some sort of like drug or alcohol program. I guess I'd call it rehabilitation. You know, but the point is, you were talking about a pretty large group of people that other jobs are not targeting. And it's also very positive for the community to do things like this. I think there could be benefits. So I would probably also say use of incentives for people to stay. You know, with this idea of application forms or interviews, I would say to people right at the beginning, we are looking for people who will stay more than 1 year. And you can't just say that. You need to give some sort of incentive, some sort of like, if you stay 6 months, you get this. You get, you know, a bonus, a salary increase, a raise, a training, a chance of promotion, something. So, you know, this is a pretty significant paragraph, and these are just my notes. But, you know, in addition to the outline, this is kind of really what I'm looking for on the test, is your analysis of how to actually answer the question. Same for this thing about quality. What should Jack actually do? You know, so you could say, here's our outline of strategic HRM, but then what should Jack actually do here? Let's continue with the questions, make sure we get them all, since there's still quite a bit, and then we'll go back. Okay, next. Or you want to do, well, let's do one more and then we'll take a break. The Carter Cleaning Company has no formal orientation or training policies or procedures. Jack would prefer that certain practices and procedures should be used in dealing with all customers. He wants the employees to be friendly and smile. Clothes that are dropped off should immediately be inspected for any damage or stains so the customer can be informed. The receipt ticket should be carefully written with the customer's name and telephone number. The employees are also supposed to try to sell the customers additional services or tell them of any sales or special discounts. When the customer leaves, Jack wants the employees to say goodbye or wish them a good day. Okay, so what we're talking about here is training and orientation. If you wanted, you could write down some of the problems you see. You know, like not being friendly enough, or not checking clothes for stains, not giving receipts, maybe not upselling service and not saying goodbye, you know, stuff like that. Now, for training and orientation, what are some things we want to discuss? Any thoughts?
What are the, maybe we should discuss what's the purpose of the training in HR?
Sure. The purpose of training.
And also what's the role? Yeah, and or what's the benefit of the training?
Okay.
And also we can mention the ADDIE process in this case.
Absolutely. The ADDIE training process.
5 steps of ADDIE, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So with ADDIE, at the very least, we would talk about like the task.
Now,
Yeah. And analysis, the performance analysis. And I guess together, those are the needs analysis. With orientation, the purpose of orientation, yeah, I'd say that's right. Maybe the reasons for orientation. Anything else? I would probably say training budget. How to evaluate if training was successful. And maybe, you said purpose of training. I guess with that, I would say objectives. And that's probably everything in. So let me look, that took, with your notes ready, that took like 1 minute, you know, 2 minutes. So it's not like writing this outline takes that long. You know, then you need to go back to your notes and kind of answer the question. In our case, what are we talking about? So we know some of the problems. People aren't being friendly. They're not checking clothes for stains. They're not giving receipts. They're not upselling, and they're not saying goodbye. And there's no formal orientation or training. So this is kind of 2 separate things. So what do you recommend? Can anybody give me some recommendations?
can we mention like some ways of training, like directed training or indirected training? I remember.
Sure. Sure. I mean, I think I would probably say like Jack should start with orientation. You know, and then for orientation, I would probably discuss like, maybe give employees like, I don't know, 2-hour, you know, orientation, explain, you know, and then you have to decide what to explain. Yeah.
Mentoring.
Mentoring.
But this one
Sure.
is like, yeah.
I'm not
Is-
sure. Mentoring. Why would you suggest mentoring?
Maybe having an employee work with an existing employee or like more experienced employee for like half a shift or something will let them kind of see those expectations in practice.
Okay. What would be the benefit to the employee who's being the mentor? Why would they do this? Why would they want to?
Because it's the best way to kind of practice and demonstrate things is to actually show it and do it. So it's like,
Yeah,
it's
but I
also
mean,
kind of,
but for this kind of job where you're washing clothes, if this was my job and you came in and said, David, we're going to give you some additional responsibilities. Now you're in charge of training Ethan, the new guy also. I'd be like, what? Why?
oh, maybe you could give them like a slight training bonus, like another $2 or something during that time, or?
I think you'd have to give them something. It doesn't need to necessarily be financial. Maybe you say, okay, if you can do a good job training the next 5 people, then the next time we have a manager position open, you're in line for that job, something, but it's got to be something. You know, that's the point also. If you just say, in our case, Jack should use mentoring, I'm not going to give a lot of points for that because you're not telling me why or how. You know, if you just said, Jack, hey, you should have mentors, Jack wouldn't know what you're talking about. You have to really explain this without just throwing in vocabulary words. So mentoring, so that like current employees can guide new employees for some time to show them how to do the job. And if they do that, they get a benefit like a small salary increase or promotion possibility, you know, something where you tell me a little about what you mean by just saying mentoring. So with the orientation too, if you just say Jack should give an orientation, I'll give you a point. I mean, of course he should do an orientation. That's a big part of what we learned in this subject. But what should they talk about? Why should they do an orientation? You know, an orientation has a lot to do with, there were 4 purposes of having an orientation. But to explain, you know, basic rules of the company and the culture and philosophy of the company and the story of the company and where they could be in the future. I mean, this does matter. I mean, you have to know that most jobs like washing clothes or working at McDonald's or things like that, McDonald's is actually not bad at this because they put so much money into psychology. But a lot of these small, non-exempt jobs, they do not show people this kind of respect. You know, you get hired and they come to work and say, okay, here's the washing machine, here's the dryer. If you have any problems, call me. They do not sit down with the employees and say, listen, here's our culture. Here's who we are. We want you to be a part of this. Here's where we see ourselves in the future. Here's the opportunities that we offer you. Here are the attitudes and behaviors that we expect. And here are the rewards we offer, like this sort of respectful sitting down with somebody and really showing them that it doesn't matter that you're just washing clothes. It doesn't matter that you're just making hamburgers. What matters is that you're part of this organization now. You know, so I think orientation is important. Mentoring is totally fine, but I think you would need to explain that Jack needs to do a needs analysis. a task analysis, a performance analysis. But again, you can't just throw those words out. You have to really explain what you mean by that. Okay, let's take a break now. You know, unless you want to ask any more questions about the training part. I mean, mentoring is fine. You know, yeah, I think directed and non-directed. But, you know, for this, I would probably say, you know, like recommend that Jack use directed training. And why?
Can we mention simulation? Is it simulation
Absolutely.
as a directed training?
Simulation, vestibule training. I mean, those are, you know, but also you know, what's really important to me is the because. You know, he should use simulation training because this is a hands-on job. It's not theory, it's practice. The employees should experience what a rush of customers feels like. You know, something like that would be, for me, a very solid answer, because it shows that you're really explaining to me why you think he should use this kind of training. Anything else? For the budget, you don't need to give me an exact amount of money that you think it would cost. But I would say that you need to explain if he should use training, and if he's going to use training, how to evaluate if the training was successful. So how do we evaluate if it was successful? Reaction, learning, behavior, and results. And I would say in a really good A+ answer, you would tell me which one you would use to evaluate it and why. You know, which one you would use and why. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We are now recording again. So let us continue with this practice test. Okay. Next paragraph. As there's no orientation when new employees are hired, they usually aren't informed of Jack's policies. Also, the Carter Cleaning Company pays workers on the first Tuesday of each month rather than on the last day of the month. And recently, some workers complained about this. They had started working, but no one had told them about this payment policy. Jennifer has discovered there are no clear policies on paid holidays, lateness and absences, or health benefits. She also feels there should be policies about maintaining a clean work area, personal appearance, cleanliness, taking personal phone calls at work, and eating or smoking at work. Anything we want to say about this paragraph that we didn't already say?
About the incentive and payment?
Well, do we want to talk about payment here?
Performance management system?
You know, I mean, personally, I think this is still about,
Oh, yeah, not yet. Okay, not rigid yet.
I think this is still about orientation.
Yeah.
You know, this is the orientation idea. So I probably would have just moved the orientation stuff and put it over here.
Mm.
Next is evaluation. So after spending a few weeks on the job, Jennifer was surprised to discover that her father had not formally evaluated any employee's performance for all the years he had owned the business. Jack said he had 100 more important things to do, such as boosting sales and lowering costs in any way. Employees often didn't stay at the job for long enough to make it worthwhile to appraise them. He felt that since he gave both the employees and managers occasional positive feedback when a job was well done, or criticism if there was a problem, the workers all knew how he felt about their work. Jennifer believes a more formal appraisal approach is required. She believes that there are criteria such as quality, quantity, attendance, and punctuality that should be evaluated periodically, even if a worker is paid based on how much they produce. Furthermore, she feels quite strongly that the managers need to have a list of quality standards for matters such as store cleanliness, efficiency, safety, and adherence to budget on which they know they are to be formally evaluated. Okay, so here we're talking about evaluation. Now, I'll let you in on a secret about the final exam, which is these, I mean, and it should be pretty obvious, but I'll just say it. These are the areas that are on the final exam, right? This is what we studied in class. So the final exam is 100% going to have something with laws, no question. It's going to have something with strategic HRM. It's going to have something with recruitment. It's going to have something with selection. It's going to have something with both training or orientation, though I'm not sure which one I'll make more heavy. And it's going to have something with evaluation. And then the next one after this, I'm sure, will be compensation, you know, because that's the fifth thing. Now, we didn't cover health and safety, fairness, and unions this semester, so that will not be on the test. I'm not going to test you on anything we didn't do in class, but I will test you on everything we did do in class. Okay, so what do we need to talk about for evaluation? Well, you know, we could look at some of the problems. What are the problems here? There's no evaluation. Her father had not formally evaluated any employee's performance. So that's a problem. Jack says he has 100 more important things to do. Employees often don't stay at the job for long enough. He gives occasional positive feedback or criticism. That right now, that's his method. Jennifer thinks there should be a more formal approach, and she's interested in some of these criteria. And she also said the managers should have a list of quality standards, and she gave a few that she thinks are important. So we have some information in the question that we can use. So the problems here, right? Jack isn't evaluating employees. He sometimes gives praise or criticism, nothing formal. Jennifer wants formal evaluations. Employees should use like quality, quantity, attendance, punctuality. By the way, Christine, what does punctuality mean?
Be on time.
Good. Okay, so these are kind of our problems. Now, what can we talk about in this subject of evaluations?
Objectives of the performance management system.
Sure. That's good.
And
Anything
the
else?
reasons to appraise,
Sure.
and maybe benefit as well by doing the appraisal.
And I would say something like reasons to appraise and benefits. I might put that in after. I don't think that would be the most important thing to me if I only had limited time to answer this question. You know, you'd be getting to the end of your time on the test. So I might save that for if I had extra time. Definitely, you need to know the 3-step appraisal cycle and the 7. I gave you more than 7. How many appraisal methods did I give you? Give you a lot.
12.
I think you gave us.
I think it was
12.
12.
Yeah. Now, again, I would not say you should list all 12. You can. I mean, look, this is an open book test. You guys should come into the test with, personally, I think, you know, take this stuff we're doing today. And if you have some of these like paragraphs pre-prepared, you should almost, this should be your toolbox, that you would come in with some stuff on a Word document that you know you could just cut and paste. You shouldn't have to write down all 12. You should already have that pre-prepared. Now, do you need to list them? No, of course not. That just tells me you can cut and paste. You need to tell me which ones you would use and why. But this is stuff you could put. After this, there are some appraisal problems we learned about, and then segmenting employees. And that we talked about the 4x4 matrix. Let's make sure we understand that. What does segmenting employees mean? Can somebody tell me?
Is it like based on the employee's value to the organization?
Yes.
Or like putting as much?
So evaluating based on both employee performance, both employee performance and value of the employee. Because these methods are just based on performance. They're not based on value. Now, this is the stuff you'd put in the intro as much as you have time. And then in our case, now, what do you think? What should they do in our case? Well, why is performance management important? You know, if you had to convince Jack, this would be like the objectives of a performance management system. If Jennifer says to Jack, I think we need to spend all this time and make this new system, and Jack says, why? I tell people when they're doing good. I tell people when they're doing bad. Come on, what else? What does it matter? We're just washing clothes here. How would you explain to Jack that, no, this is actually important? Any suggestions?
We can find out which employees kind of need maybe extra training, or which employees are then more value to us, who maybe should be more incentivized or kind of given more later on, or like promised managerial roles, or just can't just give them money.
Okay.
But that also helps too.
Which employees are worth developing? Which ones need more training? That's true.
It helps to retain the employees as well.
Why would it help to retain people if you give them an evaluation?
Maybe we can say it will provide the continuous support so that make employees happy while they're working in their company. So that's
But how would giving them an evaluation make them happy?
You don't have to say, like, you don't have to criticize, but you can give like valuable feedback.
Okay, so I would say giving employees benchmarks and then giving feedback on whether they achieve those benchmarks is valuable for employee satisfaction retention so they don't quit. I think that is relevant. I would say it like gives employees an understanding of expectations. Anything else? Okay. I mean, there is more stuff about motivation or growth or allowing employees to express themselves, and you could say it whatever way you want. But first, I would say, why is it important to Jack? Then, in terms of the reason, benchmarks is a really important word when we're talking about this, right? Because it's in the 3-step appraisal cycle. Step 1 is create the benchmarks. I would also say with this 3-step cycle, a couple things that are important here are like the benchmarks, also known as the standards, participative goal setting. Along with this also, who should appraise? That's a really important issue. Should Jack be the one to appraise everybody, or Jennifer, or should there be 360-degree evaluations? What if Jack says to an employee, every time I come in, your area is always messy and you got to clean it up. But actually, if they had the customers do the appraisals, that employee would get very high ratings because all the customers like him. There's benefits to having the customers do the appraisals in something like this. Jack is barely ever there, but he doesn't think about that necessarily. Or peer appraisals. There are benefits to having someone else do the appraising. Now, a really critical, so I think that's another thing I would want you to explain, like who should appraise? I would say, maybe customers, and always give me the because. Maybe customers because they're the ones who will bring Jack money if they like the employees' service or performance. But I think one of the big questions here is which of the methods would you use and why? I mean, that's, to me, a big part of the point value in this evaluation part is going to be, can you explain which method you would use and why? So give me some thoughts on a method you would use and why.
Maybe 360-degree feedback, because employer will be able to collect all the holistic view of the information from supervisor or peers and the customers, so you can get ample information, which is more effective when it comes to assessment.
Okay, sure. I agree with that, but that's the who should appraise idea. That's not the method.
Oh.
Should it be quantitative, qualitative, or ranking, first of all?
Mm-mm.
And then of those 3, which one do you recommend and why?
So qualitative.
So you'd recommend qualitative.
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because this is service toward the customer, and how you provide a high quality of service will determine that you are a good staff. So it means they should focus more on the quality rather than numbers, the amount of the product, whatever. I think that doesn't matter in this case. So quality should be more important. So 360 would be qualitative.
Well, okay. I mean, 360 degree is not one of the methods, one of the 12 methods. So
okay.
Qualitative is it's a service position, but what does qualitative method mean?
Oh, like first choice and weight checklist, those things, right?
Yes.
Graphic rating scale method then, qualitative.
Okay, well, that's quantitative.
Oh, is it? Oh, I thought it was qualitative.
No, because it has numbers. Graphic rating scale, forced choice, and weighted, what do I call it? Weighted checklist are all quantitative. Qualitative would be more like writing essays.
Critical incident method, those things would be.
Right. So maybe I would say maybe qualitative for the managers. You know, I'd recommend qualitative for the managers because we're talking about cleanliness, efficiency, safety, adherence to budget. So for the managers, maybe something like critical incident.
Weighted checklist.
Weighted checklist for managers, I wouldn't use that. What is the weighted checklist?
Like all the descriptive statement which considered to be effective or ineffective behavior in the job, is it? Like items rating from poor to the good.
Okay, so weighted checklist is just like the graphic rating scale, except the difference is each question has a weight and the managers don't know the weight. So I think weighted checklist is a good choice, but you have to be clear on why. For a critical incident, or I probably wouldn't use essays. I might use some sort of self-evaluation for the managers. You know, I mean, you guys know, I said before, probably my favorite method is, anybody remember what's my favorite method?
Bars?
Hey, bars is my favorite method. I think the bars method is very good. So that's probably what I would recommend for the employees. You know, but I need some reasons. You have to tell me why you would recommend. Now, would anybody choose a ranking? Can anybody defend why you might use a ranking system like alternation ranking or paired comparison or forced distribution?
Only if we have to fire someone or give like a bonus.
To engage the employees?
Okay, so in the case of promotions, bonuses, or firing, maybe use a ranking system like, you know, alternation ranking. Why would you recommend that, Bella?
Because when you have to choose only one person to either promote or fire, then I think the ranking method is going to be more useful.
Okay, and then I would still want to know why would you choose alternation ranking versus paired comparison, for example. You know, the point is, I want you to know these methods and know the goods and bads of them and apply one. Don't just say, you should use methods. Be clear on which methods and why. So definitely this kind of stuff is going to be on the test, you know, that's a fact. Okay, let's keep going. Last part. Jack knows that a clothes presser should press about 25 shirts or jackets per hour. When his pressers have a busy day, they often press about 23 to 25 shirts per hour. When the day is slow, however, they press about 12 to 15 shirts per hour so that they can still earn their hourly pay and not lose money. Jack has always paid his workers on hourly wage, and the managers also receive a year-end bonus. Jack spoke to the workers a few times about this, but their behavior never changed. Jack is concerned because if the workers work slowly, Jack still needs to keep on the steam boilers and compressors to work the machine, to power the machines. The fuel charges are almost $6 per hour. Jack didn't want to fire workers, but needed to find a way to get them to work faster on slow days. His solution was to tell the workers that he would pay them 33 cents per shirt pressed rather than $8 an hour. That way, if they pressed the shirts quickly, they would still make the same amount of money. The experiment worked pretty well, but now that the workers are trying to press shirts as quickly as possible, the quality has gone down a bit. Jack is considering whether he should extend this policy to other stores. He's also wondering if there should be an incentive plan for our managers. Okay, so clearly we're talking about compensation here. And then also there's going to be a part of talking about incentives and benefits. Those are the last two parts that are going to be on the final. So with compensation, what are we talking about here? We could talk about the problems. What are some of the problems here?
Employees working slowly when the hours are slow, or sorry, the not so busy.
Okay. Okay, so they're too slowly if paid by the hour, too quickly if paid by the number of items. And that's pretty much the big problem there. Also,
Quality going down.
yeah, quality going down, and need a system to for managers' incentives. Those are the problems. Okay, so what are we talking about in compensation? What are some of the things we need to talk about?
Find out the external and internal market. About the job, comparing the job to other same position in the same industry, to see like what are the prices, what are the salary.
Okay, so you're mentioning that, is that part of a bigger plan? Or are you just suggesting that they compare this job to other jobs?
No, that's part of a bigger plan.
Okay. So I would probably talk about, I'd start by talking about like effective compensation systems, you know, and some of the things that are required for an effective compensation system. I talked about a lot of them in class and in the PPT. And what you're saying is part of an effective system. But overall, you're not really telling me like the purpose of a system. Right now, Jack doesn't really have a system. I mean, he does, but it's very simple. And he doesn't really have a system. You know, the purpose of a compensation system should be things like motivation, growth, satisfaction, incentives, encouragement, flexibility. Something else? I guess also competition. You know, those are some of the things that Jack's not thinking about this. I mean, only in the most basic way is he thinking about motivation. I want to motivate the workers to work as fast as possible without sacrificing quality. He's thinking about that, but he's not thinking about motivating them as people. At this point, and it's not his fault, but Jack is looking at the employees like they're machines, like they're tools in a factory to use. He's not really looking at them from a more social perspective. And that is a more organizational behavior thing, to look at people from less of a classical perspective and more of a human relations perspective. So I wouldn't discuss that necessarily, but I would discuss that he needs a system that's not too complicated, that is flexible, but that the employees also understand and allows them to be motivated. And then when I said is the suggestion that I think it was Christine just gave, Is it part of a bigger plan? There's this 5-step plan for compensation. And what you just said was really step 1, right? And step 1 is kind of external equity, right? Is Carter Cleaning Company offering salaries that are similar to competitors? That's the external part. And another way to say that was the salary survey. Now, what's the next part? Internal equity. That has a few important subparts. And if you remember, the most important to me is relative worth and compensable factors. Those are the two most important to me. So what is relative worth? Jody, can you explain what's relative worth?
I don't know. Sorry.
How about my good friend Anais?
I'm sorry, what?
I said, what is relative worth?
It's when you pay, it's what you pay people that are doing the same job, or I mean, the same level of importance.
It could be, but it's about what people are worth to the company. It doesn't mean that everybody's worth the same thing. Let's say that Anais, we hire you to be a manager of the Carter Cleaning Company, a manager of one of the stores. And we recently hired Harry to wash clothes at one of the stores. Now, you guys have different relative worths. Does it make sense that the manager would earn more money than the clothes washer? Sure, of course it makes sense. And if Harry's a new hire and Bella is also washing clothes, but she's been here for 3 years, it might make sense that Bella would earn more than Harry because she has more seniority. But that's all very common sense. How do we determine exactly how much Anais should make, how much Harry should make, how much Bella should make? And then if Harry says, hey, David, I'm the manager, I found out, or Harry found out that Bella makes more money and he wants to know why. If I just say, yeah, she's been here longer. Okay, I mean, that's very common sense, but there's no quantitative measurement to it. It's not very scientific that we just say, oh yeah, Anais is the manager, she gets more. Well, how much more? Well, as much as we decide. That's not very scientific. So relative worth is how much is each employee worth relative to each other, relative to the organization. What Anais is worth to us compared to what she might be worth to Apple or IBM or Facebook. That's different because it's relative to something different. Relative means in relation to. What Harry is worth in relation to Bella, what Anais is worth in relation to Harry, what they are worth in relation to this business. It's all relative. What you're worth. What would I be worth teaching improvisation? I teach theater. What am I worth teaching theater to a bunch of college kids? Or teaching because I've done that and I've earned, nothing, compared to teaching the exact same skills for Alibaba, because I've done that and I've earned good money, but I taught the same thing. What changes isn't what we do. What changes is your relative worth. My worth to Alibaba was much higher than my worth to a bunch of college kids, even though I was doing the same thing. So your worth relative to other people, relative to the industry, that's really what we're trying to find out here. And we find that out using compensable factors. Now, obviously, we don't have enough time now for me to sort of reteach this. As I made an offer in my business law class, if you guys want another review class, that is okay. That is fine with me. Send me a WeChat. We can have, there are 2 more of these practice tests that obviously we're not going to get to, but in today's class, you know, we could take a quick look at one of them, but we're not going to really get to them. If you guys want to have an additional class to like discuss practice test 3, cool. I have no problem with that at all. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy these classes where I talk and a bunch of people have to listen to me or they will fail. I find that entertaining. So I need you to know relative worth and compensable factors. I need you to know the pay grades, the wage curves, the rate ranges, right? These are the 5 steps. Well, 6 steps, really. Relative worth and compensable factors go together. Any questions on this? I mean, this is pretty critical for the compensation part. For compensable factors, you need to understand the difference between using intuition versus the point system. You need to understand the Hay chart. I think it's called Hay guide chart method. You need to understand how points are given for different factors. Any question on that? We also talked about determining pay rates, and we talked about things like there was legal, equity, legal, equity, policy, and union factors. You can mention that if you have time, you know, with the giving or making pay grades, that there were 4 factors. Obviously, it has to be legal. You can't make pay grades in any sort of discriminatory way. You have to follow any union guidelines. You have to follow equity, which is making sure it's fair. And the one that's most important to me is policy. And that's the idea that the goals of the organization should be reflected in the compensation system. So this is actually a really important idea, so important that let me give it its own bullet point. This goes with effective compensation systems. The compensation system should match the goals of the organization. It should help push the organization towards its goals. So if you remember in class, I talked about CIP and what if CIP wants to be an entrepreneurial school, and that maybe they could have a system of compensation or benefits or incentives that would push the teachers towards the goals of the school. If the school has the goal of being entrepreneurial, then give teachers payment based on whether they push that goal forwards. Now, what is Jack's goal? We don't even know. His goal is quality, I guess. So then the compensation system should be based on achieving pretty quick service with pretty high quality. Again, if you have additional questions about this, either ask me over email or WeChat, or tell me you want to have an additional meeting and we can do that too. For incentives and benefits, what are we talking about here? We learned about a bunch of them, but pretty much you can put them into 3 categories. individual, team, and organization. Those are pretty much the categories. Now for organization, we also talked about legally required benefits. Things like retirement, Social Security. Oh, retirement is a separate one. Retirement. So legally required benefits like Social Security, workers' compensation. For individual, we talked about things like gain sharing or ESOP. For team, we talked about things like profit sharing. We also talked about what's called time not worked benefits, things like holidays and vacations, sick days. And then the only other one we talked about was personal service benefits, which are things like education, wellness, sort of what we've called work-life benefits. Oh, and I would call EAP. Anybody remember what is an EAP? We just did that in our last class. Jody, what's an EAP? I know you want to tell me.
Employee Assistance Program.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So good. That's an example of a personal service benefit. You know, so I'd probably put incentives and benefits into the individual, team, and organization category. But again, just like for the compensation, you're going to have to make sure you remember to discuss in our case. For every single question, you need to discuss in our case. So in our case for compensation, you're going to have to discuss, you know, Jack wants like quality and quick service. So compensation should match that, or maybe I'll say should encourage that. You know, for external equity, Jack needs a salary survey to make sure he's paying, you know, because he needs to make sure he's paying what other companies pay. He also needs to determine relative worth. The compensable factors. Now, what kind of compensable factors would you recommend here? That's going to be really important to me in your answer. So in this Hey Guide chart method, you know, what is a compensable factor? Christine, do you remember? What does this mean, compensable factor?
It's like factors we use to decide how much to pay the employee. So
Okay.
like the conditions, do they have responsibilities? What's their impact?
Sure. So what are some factors you might recommend for employees of this clothes washing company?
Working conditions.
Okay.
What else? Effort. Yeah, like what work? Yeah, which one? Do they all have the same position, the employees?
Well, there's washers and pressers. And the washers, they take, I guess really there's three. I mean, look, there's no exact thing. You could kind of say whatever you want. But in my opinion, when I envision this company, I imagine that some people work at the counter and talk to the customers. And their job is to take the clothes and check them for, is there any stain? and to also talk to the customers, maybe take the money, write up the receipt, all of that. There's probably another person whose job is to actually do the washing. And there's probably another person whose job is to dry clean and iron, or whatever they do these days to iron the clothes. I kind of envision that there are 3 jobs like this. But there's no right and wrong for that. You can envision it however you want.
So then maybe in here, the consequences of the errors can be one of the compensable factors.
Sure. You know, I would probably also say something like skills required, because if you can wash clothes, you might not know how to use the pressing machine or the cash register or something. Skills, difficulty, probably I wouldn't really put, because they're all not that difficult. I might put like customer service or something like communication. Because if you're washing clothes, you don't need to talk to anybody. And if I'm hiring people who are disabled or coming out of jail or coming out of rehabilitation, maybe they don't want to talk to people. Maybe they do want to talk to people. I don't know. You know, different people have different skills, but I think these are things we could measure and things we could explain. We're paying more or less for this job because, you know, so that's fine. As long as you give me that because. You know, and then for managers, the compensable factors might be like efficiency, effectiveness, maybe
Decision making, is it?
sure, decision making, you know, whatever, dum-dum. As long as you give me the because. And the same for the incentives and benefits. In our case. So what kind of benefits or incentives would you recommend and why? Anybody have any recommendations? Would you, let's say, Ethan, would you recommend an ESOP stock sharing plan with the employees?
Probably not for Carter Cleaning Company.
I agree. I would not do that. But what maybe, would you recommend gain sharing?
Maybe more profit sharing, because it kind of create more of a team, and it's.
Well, are people working in teams?
Fair enough. Not really. They work individually, but there is.
You could kind of say that each store is a team.
Is its own team? Yeah, that's kind of a stretch as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd be afraid of the stores trying to maybe like sabotage each other for some sort of prize. I mean, I like the idea of gain sharing here because you want to increase productivity. But maybe either gain sharing or profit sharing. Would you, Ethan, recommend any sort of additional non-legal benefits?
Obviously non-legal. Maybe time not worked. Retirement, you're probably not going to have employees work there until retirement age.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit of like healthcare benefits, especially if you're going to go after kind of younger or more at risk or not kind of university level students, or not students, graduates kind of. So it would definitely be an incentive to an employee to know that their job can give them some health coverage, dental, maybe a little bit above what they're getting, which would probably be nothing.
What I would also say is I would give that health care to people who stay more than 1 year.
Yeah.
You know, they have such a high turnover. And while
Yeah,
it's
you
going
wouldn't
to
give it
cost
right
them
away.
money, right, you know, so I would consider that. I'd say, yeah, I agree, probably not retirement, because, you know, that's such a key word for me. Because most people won't work there for, you know, 20 years. Work life, no. EAP, maybe. I probably would consider EAP because you might actually be targeting, in terms of diversity, people who, on the one hand, they need some help. On the other hand, they can certainly wash clothes and dry clothes, and they can do this job, and it's a good job for them to do while they, you know, reacclimate to society. But maybe they do need some help, and there's nothing wrong with that, and many businesses wouldn't offer that. You know, maybe EAP benefits to help target some, what I'd call at-risk diverse employees, and to show and to encourage loyalty and trust. Okay, so, and that's it. So, you know, that's pretty much what we're talking about. Are there any questions on what we've just done? So, you know, we're past the time, so I don't want to go too much longer, but let's take a quick look at test 2. We won't go through it like we did with this one, but let's just take a quick look at it. What I really want to point out, maybe we'll do 2 and 3. What I really want to point out to you is just, in a lot of ways, how similar what I'm asking you to write is. So this is a practice test, but this actually was a real test, I think in 2017. So ERI, Electro Ride Incorporated, is a company that makes electric bicycles and scooters. They were originally a fairly small company in Sichuan province, but one of their designs was chosen as the winner of a government contest in Beijing, and they were given a very large contract to provide thousands of e-bikes to different cities throughout China. ERI is owned and operated by a man named Mr. Lin. When he realized how many people he would need to hire and how much expansion he'd need to do in order to fill the government contracts, he got very worried. He hired a local manager, but quickly became unhappy with this manager's performance. Mr. Lin enjoys reading about modern management and HR theories, and he wants a cutting-edge company that uses the most efficient and progressive management models. He believes this will keep his company at the front of the market. So you can already see the first 2 paragraphs, just like the last one, are kind of an introduction. So don't worry that you're missing something in the first 2 paragraphs. That's just kind of a background. Mr. Lin has hired you to be his new manager. He told you that the first thing he needs is a lot of new employees, but he emphasizes that the employees must be the right people for the jobs with proper selection, training, and appraisal techniques in place. He said that he's willing to pay better than other factories, but he's really interested in providing a solid benefits package rather than just salaries. He wants his employees to be engaged and to see the company as more than just a job. Now, in this example, I've separated these for you so you can see exactly what I'm asking for. So, strategic HRM. Mr. Lin has asked you to explain to him what the benefits of HRM are and how this can help develop his company. His goal is to be one of the top 3 e-bike producers in China with modern designs and very high customer satisfaction. He's heard of strategic management, but doesn't understand exactly the process involved and how it can make his company stronger moving forwards. So understand that strategic HRM and what we just did, which is this SWOT analysis, the internal versus external, that is the hierarchy of goals. Mission statements to actionable goals, using digital tools. Like, this is what I consider to be strategic HRM. Recruiting and job analysis. One of his biggest concerns is hiring employees. He needs about 200 new employees. And this will include operations managers, designers, engineers, sales reps, account managers, factory workers, customer service agents, and other positions. He's given you a list of job titles, but doesn't know how to evaluate which job applicants are suitable for which jobs. He's very concerned with finding the right people for the jobs and keeping low turnover. So even though the word evaluate is here, what we're really talking about is hiring, right? And so with hiring, I guarantee you that recruitment will be on the final exam. And when I'm talking about recruitment, I'm talking about this 9-step recruitment plan. This was something that a lot of people kind of missed on the midterm. They talked about the job analysis and the job description and specification and these things. And that's very important. But a lot of people miss this other stuff. Or as we just saw in our case, a lot of people really didn't give much thought to the idea of something like diversity, which I consider to be very real in the modern world. This isn't just like a throwaway idea. Internal, external, diversity, workforce planning, forecasting, succession. I mean, these things are really critical in recruitment. So I think these things are very important. And I definitely will have something about recruitment on the final exam. Selecting. Mr. Lin wants to conduct interviews for all positions, but he's not sure how to find the job applicants, how to test them, or how to conduct the interviews. He's also afraid that he will have some biases and prejudices, and he wants to know how he can best have a fair-minded approach to the hiring process. So definitely selection will be on the test. When we're talking about selection, we're talking about the pre-employment tests, and don't forget about this, the post-employment tests. We didn't talk much about this today, but there's pre and post. These tests can all be used before someone is hired or after someone is hired. Just because you gave someone the job doesn't mean you should never test them again. You still might test them either for drugs and alcohol or just for psychological or personality reasons. Remember also validity and reliability, not just to tell us that, you know, it's not enough to just say the test must be valid and reliable. You know, you must say how. You know, the how is very important to me. The because is very important to me. But this will be on the final. Next, Mr. Lin had a bad experience with his past manager who had hired a few employees, and then those employees seemed to have no idea of what the company goals were or what they were responsible for on a day-to-day basis. Mr. Lin is worried that hiring people without some sort of process to introduce them to the company's goals and methods will lead to low motivation and to inefficiencies. He doesn't know how to design an orientation program, but he thinks it's essential. Additionally, Mr. Lin wants to make sure that his employees stay up to date on the most modern techniques, whether it's in the factories, in design, sales, or management. But he's worried that he may waste too much money and time hiring trainers who will not provide much value. He wants to know how to budget for, design, and evaluate the trainings. So definitely, we are talking about both training and orientation. Both of these are very important to me. So when we talk about orientation, we're talking about the purposes, the reasons for orientation. When we talk about training, we're definitely talking about the ADDIE process with needs, task, and performance analysis. I expect you not to give me exact numbers, but to understand about how a training budget is made. And I expect you to totally have an idea of how to evaluate if the training was successful. You know, this is a really important idea to me. So this training and orientation will both be a part of this. And as we said today, you can't just say you need to train them. You need to give me some thoughts. Mentoring is possible, coaching, being a coaching or who's the other one? Coaching or consulting, maybe? I forget the word. Or vestibule training, simulations, directed training. I mean, all these things. Next. Mr. Lin already has some employees, but he doesn't have a clear idea of who the best people are. He had asked his previous manager to tell him who the best workers were, but the previous manager just said everyone's doing well. Mr. Lin was very unhappy with this answer. He wants a modern and scientific method for evaluating his workers and determining who has the potential for advancement and who should be replaced and why. Obviously, we are talking about evaluations. So for evaluation, I expect you to know the 3-step appraisal cycle and understanding how important benchmarks are, that benchmarks are really critical. I expect you to understand the who should appraise. Should it be peers? Should it be customers? Should it be 360 degrees? Should it be managers? I expect you to understand the 12 appraisal methods. Now, what I need you to know about these is that there's qualitative, quantitative, and ranking. You know, I don't need you to list all 12 methods, but I need you to understand that there are 3 types of methods, and which one would you recommend and why? I do also expect you to understand the idea of segmenting employees, that you can't just think about the method, you also have to think about the value of the employee to the organization. As Mr. Lin said in your first meeting, he's willing to pay his workers well. However, he can't pay too much or it will cut into profits, and he wants to reinvest most of the profits into the company so it continues to grow. He needs to know how to calculate a reasonable salary for the different jobs. Also, he wants to provide a solid benefits package to his employees. He believes that incentives can motivate the workers even more than a decent salary, but he doesn't know what kind of benefits he should be offering and how to decide if certain jobs should get different benefits from other jobs. He doesn't want to go broke giving out benefits, but he needs a reasonable method for determining who gets what. And obviously this will be on the exam too, this idea of compensation. For compensation, I expect you to understand some of the ideas of an effective system. The idea that it should match the goals of the organization is very important to me. Understand the 5-step plan with, to me, a real focus on relative worth and compensable factors. To me, these are pretty much the most important thing here. I do expect you to understand pay grades, wage curves, and rate ranges, but these are a little bit less important to me. Pay grades, well, no, they're all a little bit less important than relative worth and compensable factors. I really want you to understand that. For benefits, that also will definitely be on the final. So here, you know, this 5-step plan, but relative worth and compensable factors are kind of the key ideas. Incentives and benefits, we're talking about, I think, individual versus team versus organization. I think that's how you should think about it. There are some legally required benefits. You got to know those because those have to be given. Healthcare versus retirement versus all these other things, you know, have an idea of what you would recommend, but really understand individual versus team versus organization. And the last part of this, which is ethics and employee rights, don't worry about that because we didn't do it. So that will not be on the final exam. Okay, so now that covers everything. As I said, there's one more practice test that's up, practice test number 3. If you guys take a look at it and you decide that you would like to have another class to talk about it, just let me know and we can schedule a time. Otherwise, the test will be available on the 29th. That's a Tuesday. I will make it available from 12 o'clock noon to midnight. If you need it earlier or later, or you can't do it that day, let me know. Send me a WeChat and we will figure that out. Certainly I will make some sort of accommodation, a reasonable accommodation, as long as it does not cause me undue hardship, which will be my last HRM joke for the whole semester, but a good joke. Okay, any final questions? Nope. Okay, then it was, you know, great to teach you guys this semester. I hope you feel like you learned something valuable or interesting or I hope you just pass this class and get those 3 credits. That would be great. So WeChat me, let me know if there are any problems. I am going to now give control to, who didn't get control before? Did everybody get control? Probably.
I didn't.
You didn't? I didn't give Chandra control? Okay, Chandra is now the host. Okay.
Thank
Good.
you for the semester.
No
sir.
problem. Okay. Good luck on the test. Let me know if there's any problems, and I will see you guys hopefully back in China.
Thank you.
Thank you.